This girl, named Yong Fong, was adopted by a Spanish couple from a fragile orphan. She blossomed into the cherished jewel of an elite family. To outsiders, she seemed to have it all: endless affection and a top-notch education. A truly fortunate girl. But 13 years later, she suddenly vanished and was found murdered. In an astonishing twist, her adoptive parents became the prime suspects. The plot thickened like a real-life Rashomon. Even though the murderer was eventually convicted, the motives remained unclear, leaving the truth shrouded in mystery. Yong Fong was born on September 30th, 2000 in Yongzhou, Hunan Province, China. This poor little girl was abandoned at birth and eventually ended up at an orphanage in Guiyang, China. However, when she turned 9 months old, fate took a turn. Despite her malnutrition and frail appearance, she caught the eye of a couple from Spain, Rosario Porto Ortega and Alfonso Batera Camporo, who decided to adopt her. The adoption took place on the Feast of the Assumption, a significant day in Catholicism, so they named her Assunta, keeping her Chinese name as well. Thus, she became Assunta Yong Fong Batera Porto, a name as lengthy as her journey. At that time, international adoptions were quite common. By 2004, Spain had become the second largest country for international adoptions after the United States. This was largely due to Spain's sharply declining birth rate, which created lengthy waiting lists for adopting children within the country, requiring years of scrutiny. In contrast, the adoption processes in economically disadvantaged regions of Asia, Africa, and Latin America were significantly simpler, allowing adopters to experience the fulfillment of doing good. The adoption fees and travel costs, amounting to 10,000 euros, were hardly a concern for Rosario and Alfonso, as they belonged to Spain's elite class. Yong Fong was adopted just 3 months shy of her first birthday, but she tragically lost her life just a week before her 13th birthday. In the early hours of September 22, 2013, Alfredo Balsa and his friends were driving home from a bar. A frequent visitor to the Santiago Police Department, Alfredo had been brought in multiple times for DUI and brawling. That night, intoxicated and aware of the risks, he decided not to drive on the main roads. Instead, they took their car onto a dirt road, surrounded by towering oak trees. As they drove, something caught Alfredo's eye. It looked like a scarecrow fallen to the ground. Curious, they got out to investigate and were horrified to discover it was an Asian girl lying on the ground. She was wearing blue-gray sweatpants and a white t-shirt, which was caked in mud and pulled up above her stomach. A matching jacket lay on top of her, with only her right arm partially in the sleeve and her left arm across her chest. She was barefoot, and there were damp stains beneath her. A small amount of bloody mucus was found beneath her nose, and several orange cords near the neckline of her shirt appeared to have been used to bind her hands and feet, now cut. Alfredo checked the girl's pulse, but quickly realized she was dead. Both men were terrified. But what did they do next? Instead of calling the police immediately, they drove back to the nightclub to cover their tracks and only returned to report the incident to avoid being arrested for DUI. The police soon confirmed the girl's identity, and at 4:45 a.m., they notified her adoptive parents, Rosario and Alfonso. Actually, they had reported their daughter missing at 9 p.m. the previous evening. Typically, when informing families of such devastating news, law enforcement uses indirect or soft language to ease the blow. Family members may react in shock. Some lose control, vehemently deny the truth, or display signs of emotional numbness. But Alfonso's reaction was unexpected. He merely murmured that Assunta was surely dead, hoping only that she hadn't been violated. In the subsequent investigation, forensic experts analyzed Assunta's blood and urine. They discovered that on the day of her death, she had ingested a dose of lorazepam 9 times the adult therapeutic level. This powerful anxiety medication, when overdosed, can lead to coma. Assunta's cause of death was determined to be suffocation after losing motor function due to the drug. Even more chilling was the discovery of lorazepam traces found just 3 centimeters from her scalp, indicating that she had been taking small doses of the drug for at least 3 months. It appeared she had been secretly drugged all along. So, who had been secretly administering such a potent psychoactive substance to this 13-year-old girl? What kind of torment had Assunta endured in her life? To understand this, we must first get to know her adoptive parents. Rosario and Alfonso, the adoptive parents of Assunta, hailed from Santiago, the capital of Galicia in Spain. In 2000, the city had a population of about 93,000. Rosario's father was a prominent lawyer with his own practice and had served as the honorary consul of France in Santiago, while her mother was a renowned art history professor at the University of Santiago. With such impressive parents, Rosario, their only daughter, was often in the spotlight. They had high hopes for her, initially wanting her to pursue psychology, but the pressure led her to choose law instead. Under her parents' strict upbringing, Rosario developed a somewhat reclusive personality. During her university years, she was diagnosed with mild depression and often relied on medication to help her sleep. After completing her undergraduate studies, she furthered her education in the UK. Upon returning to Spain, she followed in her father's footsteps and took a position at his law firm, eventually inheriting his honorary consul title. Rosario's parents didn't just demand academic excellence. They insisted that her romantic partners meet their high standards. During college, she dated a man who worked for the railway, but her parents disapproved of the match, causing the relationship to end. Just when Rosario thought she would live her life according to her parents' expectations, fate intervened in June 1990 when she met her perfect match. Alfonso was a reporter for Galicia's Postal News, born into a wealthy family in Bilbao, the Basque capital. However, his father had squandered their fortune. Alfonso carried himself with an air of superiority, and colleagues often describe him as somewhat pretentious. Still, Rosario's parents were pleased with his background and profession. The couple married in 1996 and settled into a luxurious top-floor apartment in Santiago, a gift from Rosario's parents. From that point on, Alfonso became the family's son-in-law. By the end of 1999, 3 years into their marriage, they still loved each other deeply, but the constant pressure from their parents for grandchildren weighed heavily on them. Rosario, worried about her lupus and the possibility of passing it on to her children, discussed the matter with Alfonso. Together, they decided to adopt a child. This seemingly perfect couple, meeting all the requirements, successfully adopted Assunta in just over a year. A remarkable feat since international adoptions typically take 2.5 to 3 years. While adopting a foreign child in major cities across Spain is not uncommon, Assunta was the first Chinese child adopted in the relatively underdeveloped region of Galicia. Coupled with the influence of Rosario's family in the local community, this event attracted considerable attention. In interviews, Rosario expressed that adopting Assunta represented a lifetime commitment of parental love. She treated Assunta as her own daughter, providing her with the very best in food, clothing, and shelter. Compared to ordinary children, Assunta lived like a princess. Not only was she given careful daily attention, but her education was also a top priority for her parents. By the age of 6, Rosario stated in a television interview that Assunta was a gifted child, having started to learn English, French, Chinese, and German at a very young age. Assunta continued to excel academically throughout her schooling, even skipping grades in middle school. In addition, she had private lessons with high-level instructors in ballet, violin, and piano. While Rosario claimed these courses were Assunta's own initiative, the reality was different. On one occasion, a friend visiting the family overheard a heated argument between mother and daughter regarding Assunta's classes. Assunta protested, shouting, "I only take these classes because you want me to." It was evident that although her daughter was indeed talented, her brilliance was also a result of forced diligence. Assunta, being both obedient and exceptional, was especially favored by her grandparents, who often took care of her. Her grandfather frequently picked her up from ballet class, and they would walk home through the park, chatting and feeding the pigeons. Her grandmother taught her how to swim. According to their nanny, Carmen Gonzalez, the family resembled a pastoral paradise. However, this idyllic family faced sudden turmoil. In 2011, that summer, Rosario began planning a year-long exchange program in the UK for Assunta, intending to enhance her daughter's English skills and help her showcase her talents. But before the plans could fully take shape, Rosario's mother passed away unexpectedly. 8 months later, her father also succumbed to illness. Although both grandparents were elderly, they had been relatively healthy, making their sudden deaths a shock to family and friends. Before their deaths, the couple had prepared a will, leaving all their assets to Rosario and setting aside a substantial amount of money for Assunta's future education. The consecutive loss of her parents marked what Rosario described as the darkest moment of her life. In response, she chose to dismantle everything her parents had envisioned for her and embarked on a late-blooming rebellion. She first resigned from her position as honorary consul, a role she saw as unpaid and merely a facade for prestige. Next, she closed her father's law firm and stepped away from her own legal career, opting to become a freelance legal consultant instead. Not long after, a wealthy businessman hired Rosario as his legal advisor and translator, taking her to Morocco for business negotiations. Despite the fact that he was married and his wife was pregnant, Rosario plunged into an extramarital affair with the businessman. In 2013, Alfonso discovered the love letters in Rosario's email, exposing their clandestine relationship. Surprisingly, Rosario's response was unwavering. She declared that the passion between her and Alfonso had completely fizzled out and promptly separated from her husband. Since their adoption of Assunta, Alfonso had quit his job to become a full-time dad. Although he still claimed to be a freelance journalist, he rarely worked and relied entirely on his wife for support, leaving him feeling inadequate compared to her wealthy lover. After the separation, Alfonso moved out of the mansion and back to his hometown. But just 3 weeks later, he returned, renting a small apartment just a few dozen meters from Rosario's luxurious home. He claimed his reason for coming back was to ensure that his adoptive daughter grew up healthy and happy, but his underlying intention was clear. He wanted to reconcile with Rosario. The reason was simple. Rosario had inherited a fortune of €1 million from her parents. If the divorce went through, Alfonso's days of living off that wealth would come to an end. He knew that Rosario was inept at household chores. She couldn't even boil an egg. And given her history of anxiety dating back to college, he began sending her daily emails. This constant barrage of communication eventually led to Rosario experiencing a nervous breakdown in June 2013, requiring hospitalization. Alfonso rushed to the hospital to care for his wife tenderly. A week later, when Rosario was discharged, their relationship had significantly softened. It seemed like the three of them were back to their old lives. However, Rosario made no moves to sever ties with her lover, nor did she show any interest in reconciling with Alfonso. Instead, she maintained a friendly, almost familial relationship with him. Assunta didn't exhibit much emotional turmoil over her adoptive parents' changing dynamics. When her father left, she simply asked, "Who will cook for us now?" Perhaps she understood that she had no say in the matter. That summer, she spent less than a week with her adoptive parents. First, she went to her nanny's hometown, and then she vacationed by the seaside with her godmother. Little did anyone know, this would be her last summer. Assunta's school year had begun just like any other. She attended her various lessons, shared meals with her adoptive parents, and after finishing her homework, enjoyed an episode of The Simpsons. But on Saturday, September 21st, everything changed. That day, Assunta vanished. Her adoptive parents, Rosario and Alfonso, explained to the police that the three of them had eaten lunch together at Alfonso's small apartment. Afterward, Rosario and Assunta planned to head home, a quick 2-minute walk from the apartment to their penthouse. Assunta, excited to catch her favorite show, ran ahead to watch The Simpsons, not wanting to miss a second. The family had planned a beach trip the next day, but their swimsuits were at the country house in Teo. So, around 7 p.m., Rosario drove alone to retrieve them. The drive to Teo was about 20 minutes. Back at home, Assunta stayed behind to finish her homework, while Alfonso relaxed in his apartment with a book. When Rosario returned home at 9:30 p.m., she found the house eerily quiet, and Assunta was nowhere to be found. After calling several friends and family members without success, the couple decided to go to the police and file a missing persons report. Rosario appeared frantic, questioning whether she had accidentally left the door unlocked. In the midst of this chaos, Alfonso quietly reminded Rosario to tell the police about that incident. But what was he referring to? It turned out that about 2 months earlier, on the night of July 4th, Rosario had been startled awake by Assunta's cries. Rushing into her daughter's room, she witnessed a large man dressed in black, wearing latex gloves, pinning Assunta down. Startled by Rosario's presence, the intruder fled. Oddly, Rosario had never reported this terrifying event to the authorities. Her explanation was that burglaries like this were rarely solved, and she didn't want Assunta to feel unsafe in her own home. The police, already skeptical, were now even more on edge. And just 3 hours later, Alfredo made the gruesome discovery of Assunta's lifeless body. The police soon found glaring inconsistencies in the couple's story. First, Rosario's friends confirmed they hadn't received any frantic phone calls that evening. Next, security cameras near the family's home captured footage of Rosario leaving Alfonso's apartment alone at 5:28 p.m. and driving toward Teo at 6:12 p.m. A gas station surveillance camera even caught a glimpse of a young girl, unmistakably Assunta, sitting in the passenger seat. Confronted with this evidence, Rosario changed her story. She now claimed that Assunta had come with her to Teo, but Assunta had felt unwell, so Rosario dropped her back home before continuing with her errands. However, an investigation of 33 different surveillance cameras along the supposed route showed no trace of Rosario's car after that. When pressed further, Rosario deflected, saying she had taken medication that clouded her memory, leaving her unsure of where she had gone that evening. After investigating both Rosario and Alfonso's phones, the police uncovered a major red flag. Between 6 p.m. and 9 p.m., a crucial window of time, neither phone had any GPS data. Alfonso claimed he had turned off his phone to read at home, while Rosario said her phone battery had died. But even more suspiciously, all the calls and messages during that time had been erased from her phone. Still, none of this was as damning as what the police discovered at Rosario's countryside villa in Teo. Assunta's body was found just 4 kilometers away from the Teo villa. Coupled with the couple's strange behavior when they reported her missing, the police were immediately drawn to investigate the house. Upon entering, officers warned Rosario not to touch anything, as there could be critical evidence inside. Rosario nodded, but moments later, she rushed upstairs, claiming she needed to use the bathroom. Suspicious, one of the officers quietly followed her. What they found was damning. Rosario was frantically rummaging through a trash bin in the bathroom. The police quickly intervened, ordering her to step away. Inside the trash bin, they discovered several pieces of orange rope, the same kind. If this wasn't incriminating enough, Rosario's behavior the following day left everyone puzzled. As the police prepared to search the villa once more, the media had gathered outside. Perhaps believing she had successfully hidden the evidence, Rosario stood on the veranda, casually eating snacks and laughing heartily. The cameras caught everything, and it begged the question, how could a mother who had just lost her daughter be so carefree and happy? Remember the large amounts of lorazepam found in Assunta's system? This drug is typically used to treat anxiety and depression, conditions Rosario had struggled with since her college years. In 2009, she even checked herself into a private psychiatric hospital for 2 weeks, claiming she felt numb and indifferent, overwhelmed with guilt, and at times had thoughts of suicide. She admitted to feeling like she was in constant competition with her mother, describing her as a lawnmower, cutting people down without a second thought. As Assunta grew older, Rosario's frustrations with her adoptive daughter grew. Their family doctor noted that Assunta's rebellious behavior left Rosario feeling exhausted and irritated. In the months leading up to Asunta's murder, the signs were already there. Asunta was often drowsy during her music lessons, and at ballet classes, she frequently stumbled and appeared lethargic. On more than one occasion, Asunta confided in her teachers that her parents were giving her some kind of white powder, which the couple explained was for treating allergies. But when the school nurse checked Asunta's records, there was no history of allergies. 3 weeks before her death, Asunta requested leave from school for the first time ever. In a note to the school, Rosario claimed her daughter was having an adverse reaction to medication. Unfortunately, none of these warning signs raised any red flags at the time. On September 24th, following Asunta's autopsy, her adoptive parents wasted no time and had her body sent to a crematorium. Just before the coffin entered the furnace, Rosario and Alfonso pulled out their phones and took selfies in front of it, an unsettling moment that left many feeling uneasy. However, the real shock came mid-ceremony when Rosario was nowhere to be found. News broke that she had been arrested, sending shockwaves across Galicia. It was hard for people to process, especially since Rosario had always portrayed herself as the perfect mother. But the bigger bombshell came shortly after Alfonso was arrested, too. At first glance, Alfonso didn't appear suspicious, but a closer look revealed a different story. For starters, Rosario stood at just 5 feet tall, while 12-year-old Asunta had already grown to nearly 5 feet 3 inches and weighed 121 pounds. Yet, there were no signs of her body being dragged near the road where it was found. There was no way Rosario could have moved Asunta's body on her own. The most likely accomplice? Alfonso, who had been lying alongside her all along. On the day of the murder, Alfonso claimed he had been at home reading the entire time. But one of Asunta's friends reported seeing Alfonso and his daughter near the road leading to Teo. Investigators now believed Alfonso had been hiding in the back seat of the car to avoid being caught on any cameras. The theory was that the couple suffocated Asunta in the villa, then carried her body to the roadside embankment. Adding to the case, in the 10 weeks before the murder, Alfonso had been aggressively purchasing lorazepam, using both Rosario's hospital prescription and forged ones. On July 5th alone, he bought 50 pills. A few days later, he claimed he had lost the pills and purchased an additional 25. Over the course of 7 months, Alfonso had acquired a staggering 125 lorazepam pills. However, Rosario's family doctor confirmed that she had stopped taking her medication during this period. So where had all that lorazepam gone? The couple had no explanation. After Alfonso's arrest, police uncovered some unsettling evidence hidden in his digital footprint. His search history revealed frequent visits to websites featuring young Asian girls, and his social media accounts were filled with numerous unfamiliar profiles, many of which appeared to be underage Asian girls. Even more disturbing were the photos found on his computer. One photo showed Asunta dressed in fishnet stockings, wearing heavy makeup, and posed in a way that was disturbingly suggestive for a young girl. Other images portrayed her, either asleep or unconscious, wrapped tightly in blankets in odd positions. Alfonso, when questioned, casually brushed it off, saying it was no different than a boy dressing up in his mother's clothes. "It's perfectly normal," he insisted. Although the photos were unsettling, there was no explicit evidence of sexual content, and the autopsy found no signs of physical abuse. Asunta showed no signs of the typical emotional or behavioral issues common in children who have been victimized in this way. After Rosario and Alfonso's arrest, police placed them in adjacent cells and secretly bugged the area, hoping to capture incriminating conversations. Although no solid confessions were recorded, what they did here painted a shocking new picture. Alfonso, who had been seen as the quiet, submissive husband, possibly even a passive accomplice, was revealed to have a much more commanding presence. In their private moments, Alfonso berated his wife, accusing her of letting her wild imagination drag them into trouble. Cold and authoritative, he issued orders for her to stay quiet. The interaction was chilling, flipping the narrative and suggesting that the real architect of the murder may not have been Rosario, but the calculating, composed Alfonso. On October 1st, 2015, the trial of Alfonso and Rosario officially began, but both continued to deny any guilt. In the end, they were each sentenced to 18 years in prison. The verdict sparked outrage across Spain, with many feeling that justice hadn't been served. Throughout the entire process, the couple never confessed to the crime. In late 2017, Rosario penned a 9-page letter protesting her innocence, but the public wasn't convinced. Over the 5 years following her imprisonment, Rosario was transferred to 3 different prisons due to multiple suicide attempts. On November 18, 2020, she succeeded. Upon hearing of his wife's death, Alfonso merely scoffed and showed no other reaction. Now, over a decade later, Netflix has turned this chilling case into a drama series, reigniting interest in the question on everyone's mind. What was the couple's motive for killing their adopted daughter? There are several theories. The first is financial. Although Rosario inherited a large sum from her parents, her lavish lifestyle and career failures quickly drained her resources. Alfonso, on the other hand, had been living off his wife, contributing nothing. The couple may have set their sights on the funds left for Assunta by her grandparents. This theory also explains why they left Assunta's body in such a visible location. They wanted it discovered quickly so they could inherit her estate. After Rosario's arrest, a cousin came forward to suggest that Rosario might have been responsible for her own parents' sudden deaths, fueling a second theory. Rosario may have killed her parents for the inheritance, and Assunta, having seen or heard something, was silenced before she could reveal the truth. However, no concrete evidence supports this claim. The third theory is that Alfonso had fallen in love with Assunta, and when Rosario found out, she killed the girl out of jealousy, forcing Alfonso to become her accomplice. Yet, this theory also lacks hard proof, and it doesn't explain the long-term poisoning with lorazepam. There are 2 other psychological theories focused on Rosario. The first suggests that Assunta's intelligence and achievements may have highlighted Rosario's own feelings of inadequacy. Her parents' admiration for their granddaughter may have deepened their disappointment in their daughter. As resentment grew, and with Alfonso possibly pushing her along, Rosario may have seen eliminating Assunta as her only path to happiness. The second psychological theory proposes that Rosario suffered from narcissistic personality disorder. She blamed everyone but herself for her problems. As Assunta grew older and more independent, she was no longer the obedient child Rosario once controlled. Tired of her daughter, but unable to give her up publicly, Rosario may have decided to make Assunta disappear for good. Alfonso, dependent on Rosario for his livelihood, may have gone along with the plan to secure his future, knowing that their mutual guilt would keep them bound together. Of course, these are all speculations with no definitive proof. With Rosario's death and Alfonso's refusal to confess, the true motive behind Assunta's murder remains a mystery. Following this tragedy, China tightened its international adoption policies, implementing more thorough psychological evaluations and post-adoption monitoring to help prevent similar cases. At the site where Assunta's body was found, there are now piles of toys, candles, and flowers. A wooden sign nearby reads, "No compassion, no emotion, no heart." Perhaps the most fitting description of Rosario and Alfonso.